advanced battery tech startup QuantumScape stock's up about 24% year to date. It's also fallen more than 40% two different times this year, and it's very much off from the high. It's down about 47% from the high. We're going to talk about where QuantumScape is in its business right now. Is it just getting started, and is there time for investors to still think about buying shares? I'm Jason Hall. This is The Smattering. Tyler Crow and I are going to talk about what's going on with QuantumScape. There's a lot of new stuff to talk about, but before we do, the Motley Fool sponsors our videos, and if you're looking for even more great stock ideas than the one that we're going to talk about right now, please go to our special link, fool.com/The Smattering. You see it right on your screen, and the Fool is going to give you its 10 best stocks to buy right now. Be sure to check that out after you finish this video. Hey, Tyler, how's it going?
I'm doing good, Jason. I wanted to put an emphasis, you were saying like down from its high. From its IPO, QuantumScape is now down 68%.
I can raise you a little bit there too. The company went public late in 2020. This was at the fervor of the FOMO market. Lots of STEMI money was flowing out there, and people couldn't go to sporting events and bars. Everybody was buying stocks, right?
Gambling on battery tech stocks.
Everybody loved IPOs. Everybody loved the newest SPACs. That was the big thing. And this stock was up like 450, 500% within a few weeks of going public. So actually, if you look at it from that high, it's down to 95%. But that was a nuts high. There was nothing reasonable about that period of time. Let's look at what's happened more recently and talk about what's going on with the business, where the stock is now, and whether we see some opportunity here. So Tyler, what is QuantumScape? First of all, make your elevator pitch for what does QuantumScape do, or what is it trying to do?
What it's trying to do is develop a next generation of a lithium-ion battery that is more or less designed for the needs of electric vehicles. The idea being that a solid-state battery versus a liquid state, which is normally what you think of with our current batteries, which use what's called an electrolyte to basically for the exchange of electrons in the battery. They believe they've created a solid-state version of that. In theory, it's faster at charging, it's more efficient, it can hold a charge for longer, and the range is much better. Basically all of the qualities that automotive would want out of a battery, QuantumScape purports that their solid state battery can do it.
Yeah.
So when it went public, it was a glorified science project, basically out of a Stanford lab. They had this interesting little idea of how to make a solid state lithium battery and had some okay lab results. And they went public with that. And when we talked about this a long time ago, this was going to be a long slog, pretty much no matter how you did it, because you had to scale up this lab prototype to something of workable size for automotive customers. And then once you have designed that, which is hard on its own, then you actually have to manufacture at scale, something that's never been manufactured at scale before. These are hard.
They took a huge step in 2 years too, right? They went from that, like you described, it kind of a glorified lab experiment, maybe a little more than just that, right? They clearly had something. So they went public late 2020. And then late 2022, they actually had prototypes that they shipped to automotive partners, right? For testing.
Yes.
That was to do that in 2 years was pretty impressive, right? So let's pick up from late 2022, you shipped those cells to automotive OEMs. So this is really the first third-party testing we've seen with their product. Where are we now? What's been going on?
So since then, they have shipped high cathode loading unit cells to multiple automotive partners, which is more testing. This is basically what they think would be the equivalent to what is going to go into a vehicle.
This is something that we just learned about when the company reported its second quarter results. They disclosed that in their shareholder letter. So we have those initial test units that went out in the end of 2022, and now we have a second batch that they've sent out. And it's a product of likely feedback from the OEMs, right? Things that need to be improved or challenges, plus things that the company's learned over that time that they've applied to their technology that they've been able to integrate into the prototypes that now they're sending back out.
Yep. So we have that. Then the other thing that was interesting is they actually made one of their first hires of somebody who is in the manufacturing industry. So this is put it on a manufacturing line and be able to do production like we would think of any industrial manufacturer. And
So they
so,
went out and they got somebody that certainly has, at least on paper, looks like has the bona fides to do this. They hired
yeah,
Dr. Sivaram from Western Digital, data storage, right? But as data has moved more to solid state, seems like they've brought somebody with the right bona fides on to be involved in doing that.
yeah. And battery manufacturing is not wholly dissimilar from semiconductors. So in the idea of there's a lot of pressing of very fine layers and things have to be done at levels of precision that isn't really reflected in a lot of other places. Perhaps not a perfect simile, but at the same time, this is something that's never been done before. When you hear semiconductor data storage kind of manufacturing prowess, that makes a bit of sense. So we've got improved testing. We've hired somebody that's going to do our manufacturing. And then most recently, they just did a secondary offering of shares, which I think netted them somewhere around $300 million. Obviously, the company doesn't make any money. It barely has revenue, not actually from selling things yet. So it needs cash. It's going to burn through cash through development, as well as trying to build out facilities.
That's the big recent 44-ish% decline that we've seen from the high. The day the company announced that secondary, the stock was a little over $11 a share. The stock trades for about $7 a share right now. The secondary that they've done was at $8 a share. That was the price that they got it at. It worked out to maybe 8% dilution. So they issued about 8% more stock than was already out there in the float. So that was the cost of raising that additional capital. And Tyler, I believe they had $900 million at the end of the second quarter, cash equivalents, and short-term investments. So this gives them a pretty decent amount of money as they start to transition into potentially commercialization.
Yes, but this phase that's coming up is the capital-intensive phase. If we remember, if you want to know the hard story, think of we hear the tales now of Tesla with the Model 3 production, the quotes of production hell, and there's been some statements from Elon Musk since that said we were on the verge of bankruptcy, trying to build out for the Model 3. I'm not making any predictions on QuantumScape, just to emphasize how hard it is from a capital standpoint this next phase is going to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. Think about Intel. They announced their big Ohio fab that they're building that's going to be part of their contracting business that they're standing up. Intel has a pretty decent amount of money, right? They're struggling, but it's still a relatively cash generative business. And even Intel went out and partnered, in this case with Brookfield, found a joint venture partner to help fund this spend on the big foundry that they're building. So we know that QuantumScape has a lot of OEM partners in the automotive space. Volkswagen, for example, is the lead partner, and they have major EV ambitions. I would expect that we're going to see joint venture partners on the CapEx spend and the ownership of some of these facilities going forward. So that's going to be part of it. So it's going to reduce dilution, debt, but also it's going to reduce the ownership stake of some of that. So things for investors to be aware of. Tyler, my question for you before we wrap this up, going forward, QuantumScape. So you're saying I have a chance?
There's a chance. I am much more conservative than you are. It's still a little too scary for me in terms of how much the stock is priced right now and where it is on its development phase. But certainly somebody that is a much more venturesome investor than I am may be thinking there's a chance.
We're seeing progress. You can't do a discounted cash flow analysis of a business without cash flows is, I think, Tyler's main point. So I like what they're doing. I like the progress. I definitely think investors, like you said, should be really cautious because until we see OEMs sign on the dotted line for orders of these at commercial scale that are going to go into vehicles that they're selling to customers, there is a tremendous amount of risk that QuantumScape doesn't do what it's promised to do.